My husband left me stranded in the rain, 37 miles from home. He said I needed a lesson. I didn't argue, I just watched him drive away. Moments later, a black truck pulled up. My bodyguard stepped out, calm and ready. I smiled as I climbed in. His cruelty had ended. This was Andrew's last mistake. I pressed record on my phone and slipped it back into my pocket as Andrew's. Mercedes pulled into the empty rest stop. The rain hadn't started yet, but I could smell it coming. "Get out," he said, not even bothering to turn off the engine. "You need a lesson, Amanda. Walking home might teach you some respect." 37 miles. He'd calculated it perfectly too far for an Uber, too remote for public transport. What he didn't know was that I had been recording everything for 8 months, and Marcus was already parked behind the abandoned gas station, waiting for my signal. The leather seat creaked as I turned to face him. Andrew's jaw was set in that familiar line of satisfaction, the one he wore when closing a particularly ruthless hedge fund deal. Just 3 hours ago, we'd been sitting at Morton's Steakhouse, celebrating our anniversary. Now, he was abandoning me on a remote stretch of highway, all because I dared to ask where $10,000 had gone from our joint account. "You're seriously doing this?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, letting the phone capture every word. "Actions have consequences, Amanda," he said coldly. "You went behind my back, called my accountant, embarrassed me with your paranoid questions. Maybe a long walk in the rain will remind you who manages the money in this family." I thought about the pearl earring in my jewelry box at home, Nan's earring, found under our bed 2 days ago. The missing 10,000 had probably bought her something pretty. But I didn't mention it. Not yet. Everything had to happen in the right order, exactly as Marcus and I had rehearsed. "It's going to storm," I said, gesturing toward the darkening sky. "Then you'd better start walking." His fingers drummed against the steering wheel. "Unless you want to apologize right now and admit you were wrong. Before we continue, I want to thank you for being here with me today. If you believe no one deserves to be abandoned in a storm, literal or metaphorical, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps these important stories reach those who need them most. 6 months ago, I might have apologized. 6 months ago, I still believed the marriage could be saved. But that was before I'd found the second set of books for his company. Before the mysterious withdrawals. Before I discovered he had been slowly transferring our assets into accounts only he controlled. The moment I started asking questions, he turned vicious. Tonight was his escalation, but it was also his mistake. "I'll walk," I said, opening the door. "Smart choice. Maybe by the time you get home, you'll remember your place." I stepped out onto the cracked asphalt. The rest stop had been abandoned for years. Just a dark building with boarded windows and a parking lot slowly being reclaimed by weeds. Andrew had chosen it specifically for its isolation. He mentioned it last week casually as we drove past. "Imagine being stranded here," he'd said. That's when I knew what he was planning. The Mercedes engine revved. Through the passenger window, I saw him checking his phone, probably texting Maine that the deed was done. Then he pulled away, tires squealing slightly on the worn pavement, leaving me standing alone in the gathering darkness. I counted to 60, watching his taillights disappear around the bend. Then I walked calmly toward the abandoned gas station where Marcus's black Ford was hidden. My brother stepped out holding an umbrella and a thermos of coffee. "Did you get everything?" he asked. "Every word." I pulled out my phone, stopping the recording. "He actually said I need to remember my place." Marcus shook his head. 3 years of watching him control you was bad enough. But this? He gestured toward the empty rest stop. "This is criminal abandonment." Rebecca's going to have a field day with this recording. I accepted the coffee gratefully, warmth spreading through my hands as the first fat drops of rain hit the cracked concrete. By morning, Andrew would think I'd spent the night walking through the storm broken, humiliated, ready to beg forgiveness. "Valentina's ready?" I asked. "She's been monitoring the accounts all evening." The moment he transferred that 10,000 this afternoon, she documented everything. The forensic audit goes back 2 years. He's been bleeding money into offshore accounts, probably planning to divorce you once he'd hidden enough. And Rebecca will file the emergency papers at 9 tomorrow morning. Abandonment, financial abuse, fraud. With tonight's recording and everything else we've gathered, he won't know what hit him. We climbed into Marcus's truck just as the sky opened up, rain hammering against the windshield. I thought about Andrew driving home, smug and satisfied, maybe pouring himself a scotch to celebrate putting his wife in her place. What he didn't realize was that 8 months ago, when he'd first started hiding money, I had already hired my own team. Marcus installed cameras throughout our house under the guise of security upgrades. Valentina, a forensic accountant specializing in financial abuse, had been tracking every penny. And Rebecca, one of the city's most ruthless divorce attorneys, had been building a case that now filled 3 boxes. The house recordings uploaded successfully, Marcus said, checking his phone. "We've got him on camera last Tuesday bringing none over while you were at your mother's. They used your bed." Something cold settled in my chest. Not heartbreak that had passed months ago. This was something harder, crystalline, pure resolve. "He's been planning this for a while," I said quietly. The escalation, the financial control, the isolation from friends. Classic abuse patterns. Rebecca says judges don't look kindly on husbands who abandon their wives as punishment. Marcus drove carefully through the storm, taking back roads to avoid any chance of Andrew spotting us. We'd planned this route weeks ago, even rehearsed it. Every detail mattered. The hotel room was booked under my maiden name, paid in cash. Marcus had been withdrawing gradually for 2 months. The clothes I'd need were already there, along with copies of every document. "You know he'll come looking for you when you don't show up tonight," Marcus said. Let him. The hotel security cameras would show me checking in alone, soaking wet, traumatized. The front desk clerk would testify that I could barely speak through the tears. Rebecca had coached me on exactly what to say and how to act. The rain grew heavier as we approached the city. By now, Andrew was probably on his second drink, maybe calling May in to brag about the lesson he'd taught me. Tomorrow, he'd wake expecting to find me broken. Instead, he would find his assets frozen, his office locked, and federal investigators waiting to discuss the discrepancies Valentina had uncovered in his hedge fund books. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked as the hotel came into view. I thought about the woman. I had been 3 years ago independent and successful before Andrew systematically dismantled my life. I thought about the recording on my phone, Andrew's cold voice telling me to get out and walk 37 miles in a storm. I thought about Man's earring, the empty bank accounts, and the prenup he'd hidden in his office that would have left me with nothing. "I've been ready for 8 months, I told Marcus. He just gave me the final piece of evidence I needed. Marcus pulled up to the hotel's side entrance. I grabbed the small bag we prepared, just enough to make it look like I'd escaped with nothing and stepped out into the rain. It was time to play the part of the traumatized wife, abandoned and afraid. The hotel lobby felt impossibly bright after the darkness outside. Water dripped from my hair onto the marble floor as I approached the front desk, my hands shaking just enough to be convincing. The night clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, immediately reached for a stack of towels. "Oh my goodness, are you all right?" she asked, rushing around the counter to wrap one around my shoulders. "My husband?" I managed, letting my voice crack. "He left me at a rest stop in the storm. I had to walk for miles before someone helped me." Her face shifted from concern to horror. Perfect. Every word would be documented in the hotel's incident report, just as Rebecca had instructed. The clerk guided me to a chair, brought me hot tea, and processed my check-in while I used my maiden name, Amanda Harrison, and paid with the emergency credit card I'd opened 6 months ago. The one Andrew knew nothing about, room 412, was small but clean, overlooking city lights blurred by the rain. I locked the door, set the chain, and finally allowed myself to breathe. Then I pulled out my second phone, the one Marcus had given me, and played back the recording from the car. Andrew's voice filled the room, cold and measured. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" Calling my accountant behind my back. Asking questions about our finances like you'd understand the answers. My own voice, calm and deliberate. "It's our money, Andrew. I have a right to know where it's going. Our money." His laugh was sharp. "I earn it. I manage it. You spend it on overpriced groceries and those ridiculous charity luncheons. $70 for organic vegetables last week, Amanda. $70. I remembered that shopping trip. I'd bought ingredients for the dinner party he'd insisted on hosting for his clients. That same night, he'd spent $800 on wine without blinking. The recording continued. "You embarrassed me at the Morrisons' party, contradicting me about the European markets in front of my colleagues. Where did you even get those opinions?" "Some morning talk show. I have an MBA from Northwestern, Andrew. I worked in financial services for 5 years before we met, before I rescued you from that mediocre career. You were analyzing penny stocks at a third-tier firm. I gave you a life you never could have achieved on your own." I closed my eyes, remembering the woman I'd been at Henderson Investments. I hadn't been analyzing penny stocks, I'd been managing a $30 million portfolio. But Andrew had rewritten history so many times, sometimes even I forgot the truth. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Valentina found something. 3 more accounts in the Caymans. He's been moving money for 18 months, 80 months. I thought back to when things had started changing, the sudden interest in separate checking accounts for tax purposes, the financial advisor who appeared without explanation, the documents Andrew pressured me to sign without reading. "It's just routine stuff, trust me," he'd said. Another text followed, this one from Rebecca. "Judge Coleman agreed to emergency hearing tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring the recording. Judge Patricia Coleman." The name steadied me. She had a reputation for seeing through men like Andrew. She'd presided over 3 high-profile financial abuse cases in the past year, all resulting in favorable outcomes for the wives. Rebecca had been waiting for her rotation. I changed into the dry clothes from the emergency bag I'd hidden at the hotel yesterday, then sat at the desk to write. Not the statement Rebecca would help me polish for court, but notes for myself, reminders of who I really was beneath the version of me Andrew had tried to create. I wrote about the promotion I'd turned down because he claimed the travel would strain our marriage. About the investment opportunity I'd identified that would have tripled my savings if I'd still had personal savings. About my college roommate, the friendship that ended when Andrew convinced me she was jealous of our happiness. My phone rang, Andrew's ringtone. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker while recording it with my second phone. "Amanda, this is ridiculous. It's been 3 hours. The lesson's been learned, okay? Call me back and I'll come get you. Don't make this worse than it needs to be." 10 minutes later, another call. His voice was harder. "I know you have your phone. Stop being childish and call me back. If you're trying to worry me, it's not working. I'm going to bed. You can find your own way home." But I heard the edge creeping in. He was starting to realize something was off. I'd always called by now, always apologized, always crawled back. My silence was breaking his script. At midnight, 9 called. I almost didn't recognize the number, but something made me answer silently. "Hello, Amanda." Her voice was uncertain. Andrew asked me to call you. He's worried. He said you two had a fight and you're not answering his calls. He wants you to know he's sorry and you should come home. Andrew never apologized, never admitted fault. That he'd sent his mistress to deliver a fake apology showed how off balance he was. I hung up without speaking to Ott by 1 a.m. The calls were coming every 15 minutes, Andrew. His mother, Margaret, even his business partner, James. I documented every single one, their numbers, the timestamps, the increasingly frantic messages. The abandoned wife was supposed to be desperate for rescue, not maintaining radio silence. I ordered room service, charging it to the card. Soup, salad, and a glass of wine. Let the receipt show I was calm enough to eat. Let it document that I wasn't falling apart the way Andrew expected. At 2:30, a text came through that made me smile. Not from Andrew, but from our neighbor, Mrs. Chin. Saw Andrew in his driveway with a flashlight looking under your car. Then he drove off fast. Is everything okay? He was searching for my car, not knowing Marcus had moved it to a long-term garage across town 2 days ago. Another piece of evidence showing I had been preparing to leave, that his lesson had only accelerated my timeline. I pulled the curtains aside and watched the storm rage over the city. Somewhere out there, Andrew was beginning to realize his perfectly controlled world was slipping. He thought he had taught me a lesson about power and place. Tomorrow, when the markets opened and he discovered his offshore accounts frozen, when his keycard failed at the office, when federal investigators appeared with questions about the discrepancies Valentina had uncovered, he would finally understand who had been teaching whom. The rain hammered against the window like it was trying to break through. 8 months of planning, documenting, and pretending to be the subdued wife had led to this moment. The perfect storm of his own making. I set my alarm for 7, knowing I'd need to look appropriately distraught for the emergency hearing. Rebecca would meet me at noon to prepare. But for now, in the stillness of the night, I sat in the darkness and felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Freedom. The morning sun cut through the hotel. Curtains at 7 sharp. But I had been awake since 5. Sitting at the small desk with my laptop open to our joint checking account, the balance showed exactly what I feared. Andrew had already siphoned another $20,000 at 6:47 a.m. He was panicking, desperate to hide assets before I could intercept them. But he was too late. Valentina had already documented every move. By noon, my hotel suite had transformed into a command center. Valentina was the first to arrive, dragging in 2 suitcases stuffed with printed evidence. Her usually flawless makeup was smudged from working through the night, but her movements were precise as ever. She laid everything across the dining table: bank statements, wire transfer records, falsified tax filings, all neatly stacked and labeled with color-coded tabs. The Cayman accounts are frozen as of 9 a.m., she reported, opening a spreadsheet on her laptop. Andrew tried to access them at dawn. 3 failed attempts. He's probably tearing apart his office right now. Moments later, Rebecca entered, phone still pressed to her ear, speaking in sharp legal terms I could barely follow. When she hung up, her eyes carried a grim satisfaction. Judge Coleman moved our hearing to 1 o'clock. She wants this addressed immediately. Also, Andrew hired Richard Blackwood. The shark? Marcus asked, stepping in with a box of surveillance equipment. The same one who got that pharmaceutical executive acquitted last year? Rebecca nodded. Blackwood doesn't come cheap. Andrew must have liquidated something significant. Concern flickered inside me, but Rebecca placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Blackwood is good, but he can't argue against hard video evidence and financial records. Plus, he's walking in cold. We'd had 8 months. Marcus connected his laptop to the television and cued the surveillance footage. Fair warning, Amanda. This won't be easy to watch. The first clip played, Andrew in his study at 2 a.m. just 3 weeks ago. I was asleep upstairs, sedated by the sleeping pills he'd insisted I take for anxiety. On screen, he carefully photographed documents from our safe our investment portfolios, my mother's power of attorney, the deed to the lake house my grandmother left me before putting them back in place. He was building duplicates, Valentina explained, creating forgeries with subtle changes. Eventually, he could have replaced the originals without you noticing. The next clip was worse. Andrew and Nyan together in our living room 2 months ago, the night he told me he was at a client dinner. She was wearing my silk honeymoon robe, laughing at something on his phone. My stomach churned. "Turn the volume up," I said. Andrew's voice filled the room. She actually believed me when I said the conference was mandatory. I've trained her well. A few more months and I'll have everything transferred. Then we can stop this charade. Nan's giggle cut like glass. The prenup really says she gets nothing? Andrew's reply was chilling. The prenup's irrelevant. Amanda doesn't have this fine. By the time she realizes we'll be in Costa Rica and she'd be too broken to fight. Marcus paused the video. Silence filled the room. I turned to the window, staring down at the city. Somewhere out there, Andrew was realizing why his computer access was revoked, why his assistant couldn't reach the bank, why his empire was crumbling. "There's more," Marcus said softly. I nodded. The next clip showed Andrew pacing in our garage, phone to his ear. The timestamp was from last Tuesday when I'd been at book club. "Jennifer's been perfect," he was saying. "She has no idea I'm recording our conversations. Every detail about Amanda's mother's estate, the Alzheimer's diagnosis they're hiding, the trust fund from their father, it's worth nearly $2 million. Amanda doesn't even know it exists." My legs buckled. Jennifer, my younger sister, the one I had shielded from her gambling addiction for years, had been feeding him information. When did he contact her? My voice was barely audible. Valentina pulled up records. First contact 13 months ago. Regular calls started 10 months ago. Always when you weren't home. He's been paying her debts for information. Rebecca checked her watch. "We need to leave in 30 minutes. Amanda, are you ready?" I didn't turn from the window. "Show me the rest first. I need to know everything." Marcus pulled up another folder. Emails filled the screen, all between Andrew and his attorney from 6 months ago. The subject line, Project Fresh Start. Inside were calculated strategies, financial maneuvers to leave me destitute, psychological tactics to break me down, even suggestions for escalating emotional abuse. One line seared into my mind. The key is to make her believe she's going crazy. Gaslight consistently, hide things, deny conversations, contradict her memories. I thought about the missing jewelry, the reservations he swore I'd never made, the conversations he insisted never happened. I'd started writing things down, terrified my memory was slipping. It wasn't me, it was his playbook. This attorney, Rebecca said, Douglas Stern, he specializes in high net worth divorces. He's already under investigation for ethics violations. Valentina revealed one last document. This is what triggered our emergency filing. Yesterday, Andrew transferred $3.2 million from hedge fund client accounts into his personal account in Panama. Right before he abandoned you. He was running, I whispered. It wasn't just about control. He knew something was closing in. Rebecca's lips curved into a knowing smile. The SEC received an anonymous tip yesterday about irregularities in his fund reporting. I looked at Valentina. She nodded. Once we documented the embezzlement, we had to report it. The weight of it all crushed me. This wasn't just about betrayal. He was a criminal, willing to destroy me and his investors alike. Judge Coleman needs to see everything, I said, my resolve hardening. Rebecca's confident smile returned. She will. And Andrew Mitchell is about to learn what it feels like to lose everything. The courthouse gleamed with marble and mahogany, built to intimidate. I walked its halls in my sharpest navy suit, the one Andrew had never seen, bought for this very moment. Rebecca strode at my side, briefcase in hand. Marcus flanked me. We entered courtroom 4B at 12:55 sharp. Andrew was already there, hunched beside Richard Blackwood. His $1,000 haircut couldn't disguise the stress etched across his face. He looked smaller now, his commanding presence eroded by wrinkled clothes and sleepless nights. When he saw me, his eyes burned with rage. "All rise," the bailiff called. Judge Patricia Coleman entered, her robes heavy with authority. She scanned the filings with sharp eyes. "We're here for an emergency petition filed by Amanda Mitchell regarding marital assets and spousal abandonment." Her tone was precise, measured. She looked at Blackwood. "I see you were retained this morning." He stood smoothly. "Yes, Your Honor. We request a continuance to review." Judge Coleman's reply was swift. "Denied. Your client allegedly abandoned his wife in dangerous conditions last night. Time is of the essence." She turned to Rebecca. "Counselor, present your evidence." Rebecca rose, fluid and confident. "Your Honor, at approximately 8:47 p.m. yesterday, Andrew Mitchell abandoned his wife at a rest stop 37 miles from their home during a severe storm. We have audio of the incident." The recording filled the courtroom. Andrew's voice dripped venom. "You need a lesson, Amanda. Walking home might teach you some respect." His face drained of color. Blackwood leaned in, whispering furiously. Andrew shook his head, gesturing wildly. "Furthermore," Rebecca continued, unwavering, "Mr. Mitchell has been systematically hiding marital assets for 18 months. We have documentation of offshore accounts totaling $8 million and evidence of embezzlement from his hedge fund totaling $3.2 million. Blackwood shot up. "Objection. These are unsubstantiated allegations." Rebecca's voice was calm, deadly sharp. "Then let's substantiate them." She laid a thick stack of bank records before the court, Exhibit A through F. "Your Honor," Rebecca said firmly, "wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, all initiated by Mr. Mitchell without his wife's knowledge or consent." Judge Coleman scanned the documents, her expression tightening with each page. Finally, she looked over her glasses at Andrew. "Mr. Mitchell, did you abandon your wife last night?" Andrew stood, tugging at his tie. "Your Honor, there was a misunderstanding. My wife and I had an argument. It's a yes or no question, Mr. Mitchell. I left her at a rest stop, but she had her phone. She could have called someone." The judge arched an eyebrow. "How considerate of you." She turned back to Rebecca. "Continue." Rebecca pulled up another file on the courtroom screen. "Mr. Mitchell has also been conducting an extramarital affair with his assistant, Naim Rodriguez, using marital funds for lavish gifts and trips. This includes a pearl necklace valued at $12,000 reported stolen to insurance, but in truth gifted to Ms. Rodriguez." My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus flashed across the screen. "He's here." The courtroom doors opened, and Tom Chin from the SAG entered with 2 federal agents. Andrew's head whipped around, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "Your Honor," Chin said, addressing Judge Coleman, "apologies for the interruption. We have a warrant for Andrew Mitchell's arrest on charges of wire fraud and embezzlement." Blackwood shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. So is stealing $3.2 million from client accounts," Judge Coleman replied dryly. She turned to the agents. "Gentlemen, please wait until we conclude this hearing. Mr. Mitchell isn't going anywhere." Andrew collapsed into his chair, his phone lighting up with call after call. His mother, his business partner James, and Nan. Over and over again. Given the evidence presented, Judge Coleman continued, "I'm granting the emergency injunction. All marital assets are frozen pending investigation. Mrs. Mitchell is awarded exclusive use of the marital home and temporary support of $10,000 per month. Mr. Mitchell, you are ordered to stay 500 feet away from your wife. $10,000 a month? Andrew exploded, leaping up despite Blackwood's attempt to restrain him. That's insane. She doesn't need Mr. Mitchell, Judge Coleman stopped. You abandoned your wife in a storm after hiding millions in assets. I'm being generous, not holding you in contempt right now. Sit down. He fell back into his chair, defeated. My phone rang again. Jennifer. I declined, but she called back immediately, over and over. Rebecca leaned close. Document those, I nodded, screenshotting the call, log 17 calls from Jennifer in 1 hour. 43 from Andrew since last night. 22 from his mother, Margaret. Even numbers I didn't recognize. Likely colleagues or clients catching wind of the federal investigation as Judge Coleman finalized her orders. Tom Chen approached our table. Mrs. Mitchell will need your cooperation. Your attorney mentioned you have additional evidence. I nodded, 8 months' worth. Financial records, recordings, emails, everything. Good. Your husband's looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted. Andrew must have overheard, because he shot up again, pointing straight at me. You did this. You set me up. This whole thing was a trap. Judge Coleman slammed her gavel. Mr. Mitchell, control yourself, or I'll add contempt charges. She's been planning this. Andrew shouted, unraveling. The recordings, the documents, she knew I was going to leave her there. So, you admit to abandoning her? The judge asked coldly. Blackwood yanked Andrew back into his seat, but it was too late. He confessed in open court in front of federal agents. As we gathered our things, the doors burst open. Nan staggered in, her designer dress wrinkled, her styled hair undone. Her eyes locked on Andrew. You said you were divorced. She screamed across the courtroom. You said the papers were filed. You said she was crazy, that she was making everything up. The judge sighed. Ma'am, please remove yourself from my courtroom, but Nan wasn't finished. She held up her phone. I have texts. Recordings. He promised me we were getting married. He said the money was his. Tom Chen's eyes lit up. He moved carefully toward her. Ma'am, we'd very much like to speak with you. Andrew's world crumbled in seconds. His mistress was turning state's evidence. His assets were frozen. Federal agents waited to arrest him. His image, his empire destroyed in less than an hour. As we left, leaving Andrew behind to be processed, my phone buzzed with one final message. It was from Margaret. I hope you're satisfied. Destroying a good man over petty jealousy? I deleted it. Margaret would learn the truth soon enough. Her son wasn't a good man. He was a criminal, and I hadn't destroyed him. He destroyed himself. Outside, the courthouse steps were swarmed with reporters. Someone had leaked the story, likely a clerk who recognized Andrew's name from the financial pages. Microphones flashed toward me. Double quotes, Mrs. Mitchell. Is it true your husband stole millions? Amanda, how long have you been planning this? Will you be pressing additional charges? Rebecca stepped in, her voice sharp and commanding. My client will not be making any statements at this time. The federal investigation is ongoing. We pushed through the chaos to Marcus' truck. Across the street, a news van was setting up. By tonight, Andrew's face would dominate every local channel. The golden boy of Minneapolis hedge funds, arrested for embezzlement and fraud. Margaret must have been spiraling. Back at the hotel, I collapsed onto the couch while Rebecca poured water. My phone hadn't stopped vibrating. Messages poured in, shock, gossip, judgment. My hairdresser. Good for you, honey. Andrew's golf buddy, Richard. This is a misunderstanding, right? Andrew would never. 3 neighbors. Variations of we always knew something was off. The most striking message came from James Morrison, Andrew's business partner. Amanda, we need to talk. There are things about the fund you should know. Things that weren't in the federal filing. Rebecca read it over my shoulder. Set up a meeting. Record everything. By 4 o'clock, the evening news broke the scandal. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Prominent hedge fund manager. Arrested for embezzlement following spousal abandonment incident. They'd already obtained Andrew's mugshot. He looked wrecked hair disheveled. His designer suit traded for standard issue jail clothing. The reporter stood outside our house, my house, now describing the fall in breathless tones. Sources confirm Andrew Mitchell allegedly abandoned his wife during last night's severe storm, leaving her stranded 37 miles from home. This morning, federal agents arrested Mitchell on charges of embezzling $3.2 million from client accounts. His wife, Amanda Mitchell, could not be reached for comment. My phone rang again. Jennifer. This time, I answered. Amanda, please, she begged. I need to explain. You told him about Mom's will, about Dad's trust fund, about her diagnosis. Silence. Then her broken voice. He said he was trying to help. He said you were too stressed, that he was protecting you. He paid my gambling debts. I didn't know what he was planning. I thought he loved you. He seemed so concerned, so caring. He said you were fragile, that you needed guidance. I thought back on her calls. The innocent questions, how's Mom? Have you spoken to her lawyer? What about Dad's property in Wisconsin? She had been feeding him intelligence without realizing it. He played you, I said, my voice hard. Just like he played me. Amanda, I'm so sorry, she whispered. When I saw the news, when I realized what he'd done, I've been sick all day. Can we meet, please? Rebecca shook her head firmly, but something in Jennifer's voice stopped me. She sounded shattered, not calculating. Tomorrow, I said. Neutral location. You come alone. After I hung up, Marcus pulled up social media on his laptop. You need to see this. Andrew's company Facebook page was imploding. Clients demanded their money back. Former employees shared stories of suspicious activities. One woman wrote, he fired me when I questioned missing funds last year. Now I know why. And then came the most devastating blow. Nunn had gone nuclear on Instagram. She posted screenshots of texts, photos from trips bought with stolen money, and a long caption confessing how Andrew had manipulated her into believing I was the villain. He told me his wife was emotionally disturbed. She wrote that she had refused to grant him a divorce, threatening to ruin him if he left. I believed every word. He had been so convincing, so sophisticated. I had been a fool, but he was a master manipulator. The photos were damning. Andrew and Nine in first-class seats on their way to Paris, champagne glasses raised. Andrew and Nine at the very resort in Mexico where we had celebrated our 5th anniversary. And worst of all, Andrew and Nine in our own bed. She had actually posted that one, though Instagram quickly removed it. By 6 o'clock. Andrew's mother, Margaret, released a statement through her lawyer. Rebecca read it aloud, barely containing her laughter. The Mitchell family is shocked by these allegations. We believe this is a coordinated attack orchestrated by a vindictive spouse seeking financial gain. Andrew Mitchell is an upstanding member of the community who has been victimized by a calculating woman who married him for his money. She's really going with that angle? Marcus muttered, after what everyone heard her say in court. My phone rang again, this time from a number I didn't recognize. Against Rebecca's advice, I answered. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Patricia Huang from the Wall Street Journal. We're running a story about systematic fraud in boutique hedge funds. Your husband's case is part of a larger pattern we've been investigating. Would you be willing to share your experience? Rebecca took the phone firmly. This is Amanda Mitchell's attorney. All press inquiries should be directed to my office. She hung up and turned to me. By tomorrow, this will be national news. Andrew didn't just destroy himself, he's dragging down an entire network of corrupt fund managers. The FBI is already expanding their investigation. I walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere in federal holding, Andrew was likely meeting with Blackwood, trying to figure out how to spin this. But there was no spinning video evidence, recorded confessions, and millions in stolen money. My phone lit up with another message, this one from David Brennan, Andrew's biggest client. Mrs. Mitchell, I want you to know that several of us victims are pursuing civil suits against your husband. However, you are not our target. We know you are a victim too. In fact, we'd like you to testify about what you observed. The irony was almost poetic. Andrew had spent years insisting I was too stupid to understand finance, too naive to grasp business. Now, his former clients wanted my testimony to help bury him as the sun set over Minneapolis. Painting the sky with the colors of justice, I realized Andrew's public downfall was only beginning. Tomorrow, there would be more headlines, more revelations, more people stepping forward with stories about the man they had once trusted. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, I sat in peaceful silence. No more fear of his footsteps, his moods, his cruel words meant to keep me small. The man who had abandoned me in the rain had created his own storm, and now he was drowning in it. The next morning, an unexpected knock sounded at my hotel door. Through the peephole, I saw Jennifer standing there, her usually perfect appearance disheveled. Her hands trembled as she clutched a manila envelope to her chest. Her eyes red and swollen from crying. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. I thought we agreed to meet at a neutral location. I couldn't wait, she pleaded. Amanda, please. There are things you need to know before the FBI talks to me this afternoon. Marcus appeared in the doorway of the adjoining room, protective and alert. I nodded to let him know it was safe, then stepped aside. Jennifer sat on the edge of the couch, placing the envelope on the coffee table with shaking fingers. Andrew first contacted me 13 months ago, she whispered. He knew about the gambling. I don't know how he found out, but he knew I owed $47,000 to very dangerous people. He offered to pay it all, no questions asked. If I just answered some questions about our family finances, and you agreed, I said flatly. I was desperate. They were threatening to go to my employer to ruin my career. Andrew seemed like he genuinely wanted to help. He said you were too proud to ask our parents for money, that he wanted to surprise you by solving problems behind the scenes. She opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of printed emails. These are our conversations. Every one of them. I printed them all last night when I realized what he'd really been doing. I picked up the first email, dated over a year ago. Andrew's tone was warm, almost brotherly. He wrote about wanting to be a better husband, wanting to understand my family dynamic so he could support me better. The manipulation was subtle but brilliant. He was particularly interested in Mom, Jennifer said. He wanted to know about her health, her mental state, her finances. I thought he was planning something nice, maybe paying for better care. You told him about the Alzheimer's? I said quietly. Jennifer nodded, tears sliding down her face. She made me promise not to tell you. She didn't want you to worry. Said you already had enough stress with Andrew being so demanding. But he was so persistent, so convincing. He said he'd noticed signs and wanted to help. I kept reading. Over time, Andrew's questions became more pointed. What properties did our parents own? Were there trusts? Who was the executor of their wills? Jennifer had answered them all, believing she was helping her brother-in-law. Last month, he asked me to get Mom to sign some papers, Jennifer admitted. He said they were for insurance, that they'd protect her assets if her condition worsened. I actually took them to her. Thank God her lawyer was there and recognized them as property transfer documents. That's when I started to realize something was very wrong. My phone buzzed, David Brennan. I put it on speaker so Marcus could hear dot double quotes, Mrs. Mitchell, sorry to bother you, but this is urgent. I've been reviewing client files all night. Andrew wasn't just stealing from the fund. He specifically targeted elderly clients' widows, mostly. What do you mean targeted? I asked, Mrs. Eleanor Hartley, for instance. Her husband died 2 years ago and left her everything, with specific instructions that Andrew personally manage her portfolio. Within 6 months, he convinced her to sign power of attorney. She thought it was just for trades. He drained her accounts. I felt sick. I had met Eleanor. She was kind, always talking about her grandchildren. How much did he take? 800,000, David replied grimly. But here's the worst part. He convinced her she was developing memory problems, gaslit her into thinking she was forgetting conversations about withdrawals. He made her believe she had dementia. Marcus was already jotting everything down for Rebecca. This changed everything. Andrew wasn't just a white-collar criminal, he was a predator, preying on the vulnerable. I have recordings, David continued. I started taping our partnership meetings 2 years ago when I noticed discrepancies. I was building a case but was afraid. Andrew had connections everywhere. But now that he's in custody, I'll hand everything over. After David hung up, Jennifer pulled one last paper from her envelope. There's something else about Dad's estate. Our father had died 5 years ago, leaving what we thought was a modest inheritance split between Jennifer and me. But the document she handed me showed something else, a trust in my name alone, established the year before he died. He knew about my gambling even then, Jennifer whispered. He loved me, that he didn't trust me with money. So he set this up for you with Mom as trustee. It's worth about $2 million. Andrew only found out because of me. He's been trying to get to it for months. I stared at the paper, $2 million my father had hidden, unknowingly protecting it from both Jennifer's addiction and my husband's greed. We need to see Mom, Jennifer urged. Today, she's been holding something for you, something she wouldn't even tell me about. She said she was waiting for the right moment. An hour later, we sat in my mother's room at the memory care facility. She was having one of her rare clear days, her eyes sharp as she gripped my hand. I knew what he was the first time I met him, she said firmly. The way he looked at our house, evaluating everything like assets. The way he always steered conversations toward money. Your father saw it too. She opened her bedside drawer and pulled out a small key. Safety deposit box. First National Bank on Hennepin. Your father put things there the week before he died. Documents, evidence. Evidence of what? I whispered. Andrew tried to forge your signature last year, loan papers, property transfers. The bank manager was your father's friend. He called me, sent me copies. They're in the box. I took the key, its weight heavy with meaning. My father had been protecting me, even from the grave, and my mother had stood guard over that protection despite her fading memory. There's more, she said, her grip tightening. The FBI came yesterday. Not about Andrew's arrest, something bigger. His name came up in an investigation that's been running 3 years. A network of fund managers defrauding elderly clients across 5 states. The air seemed to leave the room. Andrew's abandonment of me in that storm wasn't just cruelty, it had been desperation. He had known the FBI was closing in. He wanted me broken, compliant, someone he could use as a shield or a scapegoat. He never expected you to fight back, my mother said softly. Men like him never do. They think kindness is weakness. They're always shocked when they learn otherwise. As we prepared to leave, she squeezed my hand once more. Your father would be proud of you. You're stronger than Andrew ever imagined. Driving away from the facility, with Jennifer beside me and Marcus following in his truck, I couldn't stop thinking about the layers of deception Andrew had woven. Every new revelation peeled back another layer of his criminal empire. He wasn't just a bad husband or a corrupt fund manager. He was the center of a vast web of financial abuse that had destroyed dozens of lives. But in all his arrogance, he'd made one fatal mistake. He thought the woman he left standing in the rain would stay there broken, defeated, silent. Instead, she had become the storm that would wash away everything he'd built on the suffering of others. The First National Bank on Hennepin stood like a fortress of old money and older secrets. Jennifer waited in the car while Marcus came inside with me to access the safety deposit box my mother had guarded for years. The bank manager, Mr. Polson, remembered my father well and treated the key with the kind of reverence that made me realize he understood this was no ordinary retrieval. Inside the box, I found a stack of documents that made my hands tremble. There were forged loan applications with my signature, dated only 6 months earlier. Property transfer papers for my grandmother's lake house, which Andrew had apparently tried to sell without my knowledge. Bank statements from accounts I'd never seen, but that had been opened in my name and controlled entirely by him. Somehow my father had obtained copies of it all. His handwriting on sticky notes explained what each document meant. On one forged power of attorney, his notes simply read, "He will try to take everything. Don't let him." Marcus carefully photographed every page while I sat frozen in stunned silence. The scope of Andrew's betrayal expanded in my mind like ink spreading through water. This wasn't just about our marriage or the stolen millions. Andrew had been systematically trying to erase my financial existence, to leave me completely dependent on him, or worse, to frame me for his crimes if necessary. 4 months later, I walked into the federal courthouse for the first day of Andrew's trial. The media frenzy had only intensified since his arrest. News vans lined the street, and reporters shouted questions I ignored. I wore a charcoal gray suit, one I had bought specifically for this moment, professional, dignified, expensive enough to show I wasn't broken. Andrew sat at the defendant's table in a suit that no longer fit him. He'd lost weight in federal custody, and his once perfect hair had grown out awkwardly. When our eyes met across the courtroom, I smiled the same serene smile I once gave him over coffee when he lectured me about my spending. But this time, that smile carried the weight of everything I knew and everything he was about to lose. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Torres, laid out the case in deliberate, methodical detail: 12 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of elder abuse, 1 count of conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The evidence was overwhelming: doctored books, hidden accounts, forged documents, even recordings where Andrew himself described how he stole from clients. For 11 days, witness after witness took the stand. Elderly victims described how Andrew tricked them into signing documents they didn't understand. Former employees testified about being ordered to falsify records. A forensic accountant mapped out the labyrinth of offshore accounts and shell companies he'd built. Then on day 12, the courtroom doors opened and Nain Rodriguez walked in. She looked nothing like the polished woman who once wore my grandmother's pearls. Her designer clothes had been replaced with a conservative dress, her elaborate hairstyle with a simple bun. She had been granted immunity in exchange for her testimony, and she was about to bury Andrew with it. "How long were you romantically involved with the defendant?" the prosecutor asked. 18 months, Nan answered steadily. She testified that Andrew frequently bragged about his schemes, explaining how he moved money around undetected. He called it playing 3-dimensional chess while everyone else played checkers. She produced recordings from her phone where Andrew openly discussed targeting elderly clients, hiding money from me, and even his plans to vanish to Costa Rica once he had enough stolen funds. In one recording, His voice was clear and damning. Amanda's the perfect cover. Sweet, trusting, asks no questions. By the time she figures out what's happening, I'll be gone, and she'll be left holding the bag. But her most devastating revelation came near the end of her testimony. Just 3 weeks before his arrest, Andrew had told her he planned to leave her too. He already had another woman waiting in Costa Rica. The look on Andrew's face when she said it was worth every ounce of pain he had caused me. His jaw dropped. His attorney frantically whispered in his ear, but the damage was done. His mistress had just revealed that he had been playing everyone, including her dad. The next day, another shock came. A young man named Christopher Walsh, just 22, took the stand. His sharp jawline and calculating eyes mirrored Andrew's so closely that no one doubted the connection. The prosecutor quickly established his identity, Andrew's son from a college relationship, hidden for over 2 decades. My mother has been receiving payments from Andrew Mitchell for 22 years, Christopher testified. $1,500 a month to keep quiet about my existence. She has records proving the money came from his client accounts. He explained how Andrew threatened to destroy her reputation and career if she ever spoke up. The courtroom fell silent as the prosecutor introduced 22 years of bank records showing regular payments to Christopher's mother, all drawn from accounts Andrew had stolen from elderly clients. His thefts weren't just about luxury or escape. They were about hiding his past. Andrew's defense attorney tried to argue the testimony was prejudicial, but Judge Coleman overruled him. It establishes a pattern of deception and financial malfeasance spanning the defendant's entire adult life, she ruled. On the final day, Andrew made the catastrophic choice to testify. Against his attorney's protests, he walked to the witness box, still convinced he could talk his way out of it. For 2 hours, he tried to paint himself as the victim. He claimed I had known about the affairs. He insisted every client transaction was authorized. He framed himself as a brilliant financial mind who had simply made a few bookkeeping mistakes. But once the prosecutor began cross-examination, his composure cracked like ice. He dismissed the recordings as taken out of context, suggested I had forged the documents, and brushed off the hush money as a personal matter unrelated to business. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours. As the foreman read the verdict, I held Marcus's hand on one side and Rebecca's on the other. Guilty on count 1. Guilty on count 2. By the time they reached count 15, Andrew had buried his head in his hands. Guilty on all charges. The man who once left me stranded in the rain 37 miles from home was now about to learn what true abandonment felt like. 2 weeks later, we returned for sentencing. Judge Coleman, the same woman who had presided over our emergency hearing, looked at Andrew with open contempt. Mr. Mitchell, you targeted the most vulnerable members of society. You betrayed the trust of your clients, your colleagues, and your family. You showed no remorse and accepted no responsibility, even when confronted with overwhelming evidence of your crimes. This court sentences you to 96 months in federal prison without the possibility of early release. 8 years died as the bailiffs prepared to lead him away. Andrew turned and mouthed, "This isn't over." I rose and spoke loudly, ensuring the courtroom microphones captured my response. "You're right. The civil suits start next month." He was shackled and led away, while I walked out into a September afternoon that felt like spring. The civil suits would indeed begin, with 17 of Andrew's victims seeking restitution, but that battlefield belonged to Rebecca now. 6 weeks after sentencing, the whistleblower reward came through, over $1.2 million for providing information that helped recover the stolen funds. Combined with the assets the court had awarded me, along with the trust my father had protected, I suddenly had the resources to create something meaningful out of the wreckage Andrew left behind. Marcus found the building first renovated, Victorian in Minneapolis's Whittier neighborhood that had once housed a law firm. 3 stories tall, with 8 offices, a large conference room for group sessions, and most importantly, multiple exits. A safe haven for women escaping dangerous situations. We signed the lease on a Thursday. By Monday, the Phoenix Foundation had its home. Marcus walked through the empty rooms with his tablet in hand, noting what we needed. Proper security systems, he said. Panic buttons in every office, secured entry, surveillance that protects people instead of just monitoring them. Valentina arrived with boxes of filing systems and encryption software. She told me that 3 forensic accountants had already reached out, volunteering their services. Word was spreading quickly in the financial community about what we were building. Rebecca had taken a leave of absence from her law practice to help establish our legal aid program. We need to be careful about structure, she warned, spreading incorporation documents across the conference table. We'll be facing dangerous situations, angry spouses, possible legal retaliation. Everything has to be bulletproof. Within a month, we had our first client. Maria was a teacher whose husband had hidden their savings and threatened to report her to immigration services if she tried to leave, even though she was a citizen. Valentina tracked down the money, Rebecca filed the legal papers, and Marcus arranged safe transportation. I sat with Maria while she cried, remembering my own tears in that hotel room the night Andrew abandoned me. Jennifer arrived at the foundation on a rainy Tuesday, 3 months sober and carrying a box of donuts as a peace offering. I want to help, she said. I know what it's like to be manipulated, to be so desperate you betray people you love. Maybe I can help others see the signs before it's too late. We started her as a volunteer, answering phones and filing paperwork, but Jennifer had a gift. She connected with women in crisis in ways even trained counselors sometimes struggled with. She understood shame and desperation. Within 6 months, she was leading our support groups, sharing her story of how Andrew had exploited her addiction to gather information, helping others recognize when they were being used. My mother visited on one of her clear days, Marcus carefully driving her through the city she once knew so well. She sat in my office, looking at framed photos on the walls, women who had given permission to share their stories, smiling as they stood in front of new apartments, at graduation ceremonies, or with children they'd managed to keep safe. Your father would be so proud, she whispered, touching a photo of a woman who'd escaped with 3 children and was now in nursing school. He always said the best revenge against cruelty was kindness to others. Then she pulled an envelope from her purse. This came to the house. I thought you should see it. Inside was a clipping from the prison newsletter. Andrew had been elected treasurer of the Inmates Investment Club. Even behind bars, he was still trying to play the financial genius. I almost laughed at the absurdity. 7 months after the trial, another unexpected visitor appeared. 9 Rodriguez stood in our reception area, looking nothing like the glamorous woman who once wore my grandmother's pearls. Her hair was cropped short, her designer outfits replaced with simple slacks and a button-down shirt. She carried herself with a humility I'd never seen before. Sitting across from me in my office, she admitted, I've been in therapy. I've been working through how I got involved with someone like Andrew, why I ignored the red flags, why I participated in hurting you. I know I can't undo what I did, but maybe I can prevent other young women from making my mistakes. She began speaking at colleges, warning business students about older men in power who promise career advancement in exchange for companionship. She was brutally honest about her own choices, taking responsibility, but also explaining the gradual manipulation that made those choices seem reasonable at the time. He made me feel special, she confessed to one group, like I was smarter and more sophisticated than other women my age. By the time I realized I was just another victim in his game, I was too deep to see the exit, 1 year after Andrew's sentencing, a letter arrived at the foundation in his perfect, familiar handwriting. 4 pages of venom, blaming me for his downfall, insisting I had orchestrated everything, that I had entrapped him. He cataloged every slight he believed I had inflicted, and closed with one chilling line. I hope you learned your lesson. I had the letter professionally framed and hung on my office wall, right next to my degrees and certifications. When clients asked about it, I told them the truth. Yes, I had learned my lesson. I learned that when someone shows you who they are through cruelty, you believe them. I learned that patience and planning can overcome years of abuse. And I learned the most important truth of all, that the best response to someone trying to break you is to become unbreakable. Then use that strength to lift others. 18 months after that night at the rest stop, I stood in my office, staring at a wall covered in thank you cards. 87 women had found safety through the Phoenix Foundation. Some needed only legal advice and financial forensics. Others required complete extraction plans, safe houses, even new identities. All of them had once felt trapped, broken, and hopeless. Eleanor Hartley, the widow Andrew had defrauded, had become our biggest donor. She recovered most of her money through the civil suits and insisted on funding our emergency shelter program. At our fundraising gala, she spoke with strength. That man tried to convince me I was losing my mind, she told the crowd. Amanda showed me I was actually finding my strength outside. Rain drummed against the windows of the Victorian that now housed Second Chances. I thought back to that night, 37 miles from home, standing in the downpour as Andrew drove away, convinced he had broken me. He thought he was teaching me about power and control, about knowing my place. Instead, he taught me that cruelty carries its own destruction, that every action has consequences, and that sometimes the person you abandon in the rain is already prepared for the storm. Through the Phoenix Foundation, his calculated cruelty became the catalyst for saving women he never believed deserved saving. The ultimate lesson, the one Andrew never saw coming, was not about obedience, respect, or control. It was about transformation. He tried to leave me powerless in a storm. Instead, I became the shelter dot. If the story of calculated justice kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite moment was when Amanda stood in court wearing the sharp suit Andrew once mocked as too aggressive and smiled at him with the same serene expression she once gave him at breakfast. What about you? What was your favorite moment of sweet revenge? Drop it in the comments below and don't miss more gripping stories like this.